Hey y'all, welcome to Pleiadian Point of View. I'm Peyton and I'm a Pleiadian channel and starseed coach. So in today's video, we're going to be tackling a big topic. And that is, the Pleiadians are going to start introducing us to something they've been teaching me lately. And that is how to recreate our reality. Now, we know this is something that we can do. We have heard the theory. It is everywhere in our spiritual community. But most of us are a little fuzzy on how we actually do it. So today the P's are going to start to tackle this topic. But before we jump into this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't done that yet. Now, today we're going to take a bite out of a huge topic. And this is something that the P's have been teaching me for years, and I thought I understood it. But I really hadn't. It only really clicked into place for me over the past month or so. And what happens when you really understand what the P's are talking about here is this changes everything. So we're going to start today to talk about the topic of how to create your reality. And because this is a huge topic and a little complicated, I may not land the plane with this on the first shot. I may have to take a couple bites at this in different videos. But this has been so transformative for me over the past month or two that I wanted to share it with you guys. So bear with me if I don't explain this perfectly the first time, but the P's are going to start introducing us to this over the coming videos because this really is how we change everything. And it's something that it's easy to think we get it. When they first started explaining this to me years ago, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. No worries. And y'all, I didn't get it. So we're going to start to explore this in the next couple of videos, because this is how we step into our power as creators. So let's start at the beginning. We know that we are infinite creators, right? All of our spiritual teachers have taught us that. We have heard from everyone that we create our reality, right? This is not news. We know this, but we don't really always appreciate how this happens. So according to the P's, one way that we can look at this is imagining ourselves as human beings as divine sparks of source energy. Or as I sometimes look at it in my imagination, a ball of light. You know, if we look at the essence of who we are as creator beings, right? We are infinite. But as we come into this earth incarnation, we start to put layers of belief systems over that spark of light. So it's almost like that little spark of light is looking through a dirty window. And that dirty window is our belief structures. And as humans, everything is our belief structure. It is the blueprint of our reality. The P's like to tell us we can't really have an experience that's outside of our belief structures. So our belief structures control our reality. And as humans, sometimes we can think of this as our belief systems are like stories, right? And we have a story for everything. And one way to just see how many stories you have is to just explain what your life is like. And everything you are explaining is a story, is a belief. And the interesting thing is, most of our stories come from other people. We have picked them up from our family. We picked them up from our parents. We were dictated them from our educational systems, our religious systems, our political systems. As humans, we are overloaded with stories. But our stories are really important because we tend to forget as humans that we get to decide what stories we buy into. So one of the ways that we can change our collective reality, change our manifested reality, is by changing our stories. Now, up to this point, when the P's were teaching me this, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. But what we don't always realize as humans is how many stories we actually have, and that once we start to realize our story, we can actually change it very easily. So this topic that the P's are going to be chipping away at over the next couple videos, and this video is going to be a little longer than usual because we're going to start to get into some very important but complex topics. And I'm doing this because I want y'all to understand this. It really is going to help you change your reality. So be a little patient with me. This is going to be a longer explanation than I usually do in these videos, but I think it's really important. So as the P's have been focusing with me lately, as we as humans start to realize how many stories we actually have, it gets very easy to change them, especially when we realize that most of our stories aren't even ours. Someone fed them to us along the way, and not knowing any better, we went along with it. So as we start to kind of focus in on our power to change the story, this is one of the hacks to releasing our limiting beliefs. Now, we know from all of our spiritual teachers that this is the most important thing, right? In raising our vibration, raising our consciousness, the key is releasing our limiting beliefs. Because again, we can't really have much of an experience outside our belief structure. But when we go about trying to change a belief, especially some of those big ones that we have as humans, right? The belief that life is hard, the belief that we're unworthy, that we don't fit in, that we're not good enough, the belief that our bodies have to get sick and die. Some of these are really big human stories. And so when we try to release these as part of our spiritual process, it can be really hard, right? If you've ever tried to release, especially one of those big beliefs, you may have realized that it's not the easiest thing to do because our belief systems are designed to self-reinforce. So whenever we get close to releasing a belief, it fights back. And y'all, the ego mind likes to fight dirty. So it will give us every possible reason it can think of to keep us from changing the story. Because the ego mind likes to be safe. It likes to be in the known zone, right? It likes to be in control. So when we get close to changing big parts of the human story, we tend to get a lot of kickback from the ego mind. The ego mind will distract us, will put us in fear, will make us think we're dying, you name it. The ego mind doesn't give up easily. So as humans, as we are wanting to change our reality, raise our consciousness, expand ourselves into higher energies, it's very important to find ways to release these limiting beliefs, these stories we have taken on. And so one of the ways that we can do this without triggering quite so much pushback from the ego mind is by looking at them as stories. Because when we think of them as a belief structure, we activate the resistance of the ego mind. And the mind will tell us we don't have the power to release that. That's just how things are. That's what reality is. These are some of the lies of the mind. And the mind is just trying to keep us safe, right? We never want to make the mind the bad guy. It's just part of us. It's served a purpose for most of our human history, but now it's limiting us. So we need to find a way to work with the mind. And one of the ways that we can short circuit this and actually start to release some of these human stories that create a reality we don't want is by looking at them as someone else's story. Because most of them are. Most of them are things we have been taught by other people. They're things that we have been taught by our education system, that we are being told by our information platforms, by the world around us. But once you realize that everything is just a story, and most of them aren't even your story, if it is a story that you are anything other than an infinite, perfect, abundant, free being, it is just a story. Someone else's story. So let's give some examples here of some of the stories that we have all bought into as humans. Well, one of the things that most of us would agree with is that life is hard, right? But that is just a story. And for most of us, we got this from our parents because their experience of life, all of their ancestors, their experience was that life was hard. So what happens is we bought into that story. But as the Pleiadians like to say, that's not actually energetic truth. It's just a story. Another example of a story we have bought into is that humans have to age, get sick, and die. And most of us, if we look around, this is one of our biggest energies out there. Just imagine a planet that did not have aging or disease. For most of us, we can't even get there in our imagination because this story is so prolific. It literally flashes back to us everywhere we look in our society. But this is also a story. This is just part of what we have seen other people manifesting. And because as children we saw this happening in everyone around us, our brains interpreted this as hard, cold fact. But as the Pleiadians like to say, it's not actually energetic necessity. It's just a very pervasive, very well practiced human story. So as we start to look at some of these stories we've bought into, we start to activate our power to change them. Because once you realize that something isn't actually yours, guess what? It's a lot easier to release it. As opposed to if we are sitting with a belief like these huge energetic templates of hardship, struggle on this planet, the template of aging and disease. And y'all, that is a nasty one. That is one that is very challenging for us as humans to step out of. But we can start to soften it by realizing that this isn't absolute energetic fact, as we've been taught to believe that this is just reality, right? That is one of the lies of the mind, because there is no one reality. There are infinite realities. So as we start to look at every aspect of our life and start to just think about it as a story, you start to make it more flexible. You start to realize you can change the story. But in order to do that, we have to see it and recognize it as story, as just one version of reality. And what do we know? What have the P's taught us over and over again? There is no one reality. Every version of reality exists. So this is just one version. So anything that comes up in our daily life, if we start to just play this little game with ourselves of looking at everything as a story, you start to soften the beliefs around it. Even of these huge things that we think are just the inevitable part of being human. And those are the things we tend to want most to let go of. Struggle, hardship, unworthiness, illness and disease. All of these are just very strong, very well practiced human stories. But guess what? You are divine God consciousness. You get to choose what stories you buy into. But the first step is just realizing it's a story. So the P's are going to leave us with that for today, but they're going to be explaining in future videos how we can start to dismantle these stories. Because as we do this, we reset the fabric of our reality. Because everything, again, is just the dirty window that we're looking through as humans. And once we start to clear that dirt away, we start to realize we can rewrite the story. Every part of it, even those things that we think are just the reality of being human, we get to write the reality. And we have to do that by understanding how we are buying into other people's story. So the P's are going to start to explore this with us over the coming videos. They just wanted to take a little bite out of it today, kind of give you a little taste of where we're going to be headed, because this is one of those things that seems very simple when we hear it. But once we start to actually appreciate this, it changes everything, because it puts us back in complete control of our reality. And right now, y'all, we are in the process of creating an entirely new human reality. So it's very important to know consciously, what do we want to take forward into our new earth? And what is something that is someone else's outdated story? So we're going to be exploring this more in future videos, and the P's are going to help us appreciate how to actually work with this, to start breaking down some of those things that, are kind of the big nasties of the human experience. Those old human collective stories just don't serve us anymore as rising fifth dimensional beings. So I hope this has helped you. Don't forget, hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't done that yet. And I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.